You just flippantly said, as we were talking about things we could talk on the show, you're like, well, I mean, you could pay your mortgage every 2 weeks and you save like $100,000. And I was like, and I literally did that. And so I said, well, there's episode 1 right there. Welcome to It's All Money, episode 1, which is the second episode. This is a bit, I named the first episode 0. I feel like everybody's going to keep getting confused as we move down the line, Daren.
Especially because we're wearing the same clothes for episode 1. But, you know, who's paying attention, right?
I hope everyone's watching. It's All Money. We are talking about tactical things that you can do to affect your bottom line, to affect your family's financial future. And Daren mentioned to me something which I had never even conceptualized, and yet it seems so simple. You just flippantly said, as we were talking about things we could talk on the show, you're like, well, I mean, you could pay your mortgage every 2 weeks and you save like $100,000. And I was like, and I literally did that. And so I said, well, there's episode 1 right there. So how can paying your mortgage biweekly instead of monthly save you over time?
It's a great question. It's actually not really all that secret, or nor is it, it's not like a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. It's actually, and again, I'm a psychology major, so things go back to psychology. It's really just using psychology to your benefit. And all you're really doing, and I'll show you the math in a minute, all you're really doing by doing a biweekly payment versus a monthly payment on your mortgage is you're actually adding one more payment per year to your mortgage. So instead of paying 12 months of a mortgage, you're paying 13 months of a mortgage. Some lenders will actually let that all go to principal. Some won't. Just really depends where you live and what your lender situation is. So if you think about it, being an employer of employees, I had to learn this, that there's actually 26 pay periods in a year, right? You would think there would be 24 because every 2 weeks and there's 12 months in a year, multiplied by 2, we have 24 pay periods. There's actually 26 pay periods, right? So if you're doing biweekly, it means every 2 weeks you're making a payment. We all get paid on a biweekly basis, right? So if you make half your mortgage payment on a biweekly basis, what happens is you end up making 2 extra biweekly payments or 1 full month payment per year, and that compounds and really helps you out over the long term. So it's just really adjusting your process to work in benefit with your psychology.
So it's basically just paying more on the principal, paying more on the house earlier. It's like sort of like paying your house off earlier, but because it's part of a process of just like every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, it's cueing into that regularity that your brain doesn't even think that this is something that you could or could not have paid. It's on autopilot.
It's on autopilot. And it makes sense too, because it makes budgeting easier actually, because if you think about it, if you get paid twice a month, but during one of those pay periods, you've got a mortgage payment due. You have to save some money for that mortgage payment potentially. Well, biweekly payment, you're just dividing that payment equally, and then it comes out when you get paid every 2 weeks. So you can create a much cleaner budget that way. And budgeting is very hard to do. Most people completely fail at budgeting. So, like, does it actually save you money by paying one more mortgage payment per year? Yeah, I think the math is pretty convincing. So if we take a loan amount of $500,000 on a 30-year term loan with an interest rate of 7, because give or take, they're in that ballpark as of May 29th, 2024. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that, let's break it down. So your payment on a monthly basis is $3,326.51 over a 30-year term period. You're going to pay, this is on a $500,000 loan.
I had to check this when I was pulling these numbers. I went, no. I did not believe this number. And I had to I triple checked it on a different calculator just to make sure. Please say how much interest you're paying for a $500,000.
$697,544.49 over a 30-year period. So you're paying more than the actual house is worth at the time of buying it.
So at the current interest rate, 7%, things could change in the future. But if that were to stay the same, to get $500,000 to buy a house right now, it costs $697,000.
That's right.
It's so crazy. Okay.
Pretty wild when you think about it.
I don't want to derail you, but I had to double check that number.
But there's also a little kind of misnomer, and I think we have to mention that $697,000 feels like a lot right now, but you also have to keep in mind that inflation is also going to inflate that away. Especially right now, we're going through a high inflationary period, right? So it feels like $697,000 now, but every 14 years, that's going to get cut in half from a real dollar standpoint. So depending on what
because everything costs more, you're saying?
Yeah, because everything's going to go up, right?
So if you paid $697,000 now, that doesn't really have the same impact in 14 years.
Yes, yeah, right. So 15 of those years, it's half of that in real dollar terms.
Because milk is $6 now when it used to be $3.
That's right. Okay. And it's going to be 12 eventually. Well, that's crazy. But not to mention the $40 McDonald's bill. But we'll get to that. So your total payments are $1,197,544.49 for that $500,000 home. Oh my God. So the benefit is if I can pay that off sooner, then I'm actually going to pay less in interest. Still going to pay the same principal, but interest. This didn't used to matter when we were getting 2-3% rates. People didn't care as much because you weren't paying that much in interest. Mm-hmm. But for those newcomers to the housing world, it matters. You really do need to pay that down because paying 7% interest over time and weighing that with what you're getting in the market doesn't equate, right? So now it's making a lot more sense to pay off those houses like Dave Ramsey would say. Back in the day when we had 3% rates, it didn't make as much sense to pay those loans off from a mathematical standpoint. That's changed now all in 2 years, right? So by making that one extra payment per year or those 26 payments rather than 12 payments, so you cut it in half, those 26 pay periods, you end up saving about $174,000. Now,
so if you're listening to the podcast, we ran through the monthly payment.
Let me run through the biweekly. You're going to run through that. Biweekly. Your payment biweekly is $1,663.26. Your term, you're shaving 6 years and 4 months off the term, so it's only a 23-year, 8-month loan. The total interest is only $522,731.58, and as you just said, you end up saving yourself in this scenario $174,000 and change in interest. Just by forcing yourself to pay one extra payment or by moving to biweekly to force you to just pay those payments twice a month. It's just a little trick, changes things for you.
Interesting. And so for someone who has one of those 3% loans right now, can they do this as well?
You can do that, but the math of paying off your home makes a little less sense. And that's just because of inflation and the way inflation works. Mm-hmm. That money's really cheap money in theory right now. You have money markets, and this is not advice, but you have money markets paying 5% and you have a 3% interest rate on your home. You're actually making 2% on that money if you're putting in a money market versus paying off the home because you're treating yourself as the bank, right?
Right.
Money's made on spreads by banks, right? And so if you have a 7% loan, that gets a little bit different. If you have a 3% loan, the math is different. Right. That's why we always say that paying off a house is both an emotional and financial decision, right? There's an emotional component and a financial component.
That was going to be what I said next. Is that so? Now what you're talking about, we're getting to almost a philosophical. What is it you want to do? This is where financial planning comes in because it's like maybe you really do emotionally want to pay off that house. So when someone says, "Should I pay off my house?" Well, who are you? Because to someone maybe who grew up with housing insecurity, right? Having the house paid for might mean more to them than making that 2%, right? But you need to be able to acknowledge that and have a discussion about that. That's why there's never a blanket answer to should I pay it off, should I not pay it off.
What's so interesting, there's always this intersection of emotion and finance. Did you know your house is actually never technically paid off because you couldn't live there for free? You just reduce your payment because you always have taxes and insurance.
Yeah.
So you're always making a payment to live there.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's actually just a mental gymnastics that you're actually paid off your house. Not suggesting you should or shouldn't do it. I don't know. It depends on your financial situation, your emotional comfort, but you're never really paid off your house. So that sense of security is a falsity because let's see how fast you keep that house if you don't pay insurance and you don't pay your taxes. Mm-hmm. Someone will be coming real quick, right? So I always want to just caution people against thinking that like there's this emotional thing or satisfaction from paying it off when, there is, like your payment goes down. but you're always going to pay the government something.
Yeah. But back to the scenario. So with that in mind, not necessarily with the goal of paying it off or not, but with just the eye to straight money, you're paying less in interest by doing it this way.
That's right.
And you are eventually getting to your goal quicker. With, and that's $174,000 you could do something else with.
That's right. Well, you have to also, there's different pieces of this. Now, I've tried to do this for homes I've owned, and it's actually not easy to do. So a word of caution, you can't just call up your mortgage person or your servicer and be like, hey, I want biweekly payments now. Click, 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 radio button. Let's go. It's, okay, Mr. Blonsky, if you would like biweekly payments, you need to send us an additional payment for your mortgage. So you need to pay in advance. And once that's in receipt, then we can go ahead and process this. And that's if there's, in the United States, we don't have prepayment penalties, but if you're outside the United States, maybe there's a prepayment penalty. You have to look at the covenants in your actual loan, that documents, to know whether you can do this and how it's set up. But if you can do it and you're willing to have an additional payment, because you got to pay, most servicers I've talked to will require you give them one additional payment, then they'll change your cycle of payment before they'll switch you over. So it becomes administratively a pain.
So I checked in with a friend of mine who's in the mortgage business, and I asked him about this, and I said, what's your take on this as a loan officer? And he said it's fine, it's of no impact at the time of the loan if you decide to set it up. You can also set it up after the fact. And this is just anecdotal, but he said, if you do this, and I don't know how this happens, we need to get to the bottom of this, but somehow when you start making, it must be when it hits your credit report, but somehow the loan world gets notice that.
But what I don't understand is why would they get your credit get hit to do biweekly payments?
I don't know.
That doesn't make any sense to me. I get it if you're refinancing, you get just hit with calls.
My friend in the mortgage business said to me that there are fraudulent third parties out there who are not your servicer and who are not your loan agent. There are some other fraudster who go, oh, you want to do biweekly payments, huh? We do that. All you have to do is pay this, this, and this. And they end up taking the money and running. So that's just a tip. That's just an anecdote I wanted to share with you. And it goes back to something we've said in episode 0, which is just be on your toes, right? And work with people that you feel you trust. And you can always, if you have someone that you feel you trust, then you touch base with them and go, this seems a little weird. I've never heard of this company or something like that. So I just want to pass that along. Keep an eye out for that if you decide to pursue biweekly payments.
Fair. I mean, and again, it's not like it's a panacea. It's not like it's a silver bullet. It's not like a magical trick. It's just forcing the process to take advantage of your psychology, because psychology is not such that, hey, I'm going to pay this off. And the other piece I think we need to bring up.
You almost said Chris.
I did. I was
Daren's business partner is Chris Sipes.
That's right.
He's co-founder.
And usually when I'm on podcasts, I'm talking to Chris on our Friday podcast.
Yeah, well, get used to it, buddy.
I know.
You got a second sheriff in
I know.
town.
Wow. All right. So most people our age aren't going to stay in their home 30 years. That doesn't seem to be the trajectory. Right. And so what I wrestle with, right, because I like to always talk out of both sides of my mouth when I'm talking about finance, because you got to weigh the pros and cons, because it's about trade-offs. Right. And if you're not going to be in the house for 30 years, does it really make sense to pay it off quicker? The amount of interest you're going to save is going to be negligible. Right. And so I think you have to weigh that. If this is your forever home, then this type of scenario might make sense. If it's a stop in the train life, then, and you're not going to own the home for 30 years, it might not make sense. So again, you go back to the individual. Does it make sense for this person?
So if someone wanted to do this, what would be their next steps?
Well, you got to find out who you obviously would know who your loan servicer is. You reach out to them and figure out what their process is, because each loan servicer has a totally different process. We have to talk about McDonald's now, right? And then that's our next quick hitter.
Yeah, let's take a second to talk about Sonoma Wealth Advisors, and then we'll do a couple of these out the door.
Speaking of McDonald's, I was in the McDonald's line the other day, and did you know that McDonald's brought back their $1 meal? So what they said is if you buy one McChicken, you get another McChicken for $1. So back in high school, going back to our high school times,
Yeah.
I go to the McDonald's. You know where that one is on
Lakeville?
Lakeville. That was the place. We could get there just in time before.
It was just at the edge of Casa
right
Grande's
there.
like radius of you could get there, get food, and get back in time.
That's right. We'd roll in there and get 5 McChickens, one for $1. And so Brighton, my son, he's like, Dad, that's a deal. You can buy 1 McChicken and get another one for $1. That's huge. I'm like, hey, buddy, back in my day, for $5 I could get 5. What? Mind blown. Right? And so it got me thinking, like, what are we going to look back and be like, man, that was a deal.
And there was they ran a throwback promotion when we were in high school. They threw it back to like, it was, I can't remember what it was, but for some reason they did a throwback to like the 50s prices. So I have in my life bought a McDonald's cheeseburger for 39 cents.
Whoa, I kind of remember that
McDonald's.
vaguely
They
now.
did 29 for burgers and 39 for cheeseburgers.
I kind of remember that deal. Now I've forgotten all
big
about
mistake,
that.
McDonald's, because I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
So everything's expensive. But
We're going to get a letter from McDonald's now.
we really are. I just wanted to, out the door, talk about a couple of money-related stories that have come out. People have been talking about inflation, and for whatever reason, they're drawn to McDonald's. I think because there's a perception of it's the value food, the value meal. So these numbers are coming from the Daily Mail. You can easily find them anywhere. Suddenly, everyone's looking at McDonald's inflation prices. In 2014, there's a 10-year difference. So in 2014, you could get a quarter pounder with cheese meal for $5.39. So that's the burger, that's the drink, and that's the fries. That exact same meal in 2024, 10 years later, is $11.99 for a
But wait, are the sizes smaller, Dan? Because that's the other thing, right?
That I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if the
that's
sizes have changed. I'm guessing they didn't increase.
Have you noticed that with ice cream, by the way? Like,
Yes.
There's a particular brand of ice cream that it used to be a beautiful gallon, or whatever,
Yes.
half gallon, and now it just shrunk. It's awful.
Some of that is, I don't know this for a fact, but I think there has been a movement from the obesity angle to take, quote, calories off the shelf. And so there's been a movement from health advocates that to somehow decrease the calories in the product, knowing that people are maybe I'm going to eat a candy bar. Well, if the candy bar is smaller than it used to be, therefore it's less calories. But I can't tell if that's actually from the health angle or that you get to charge the old price for the smaller size. I still can't tell that.
That sounds really similar to the food pyramid scandal that's out there now and how sugar is placed in there. But yeah.
Okay, so McDouble in 2014 is $1.19. It is now $3.19 for an increase of 268%. So then I noticed this. So then this, the Consumer Price Index, often called the CPI. May 15th, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics releases their 2024 numbers, showing that inflation was at least flat. It wasn't increasing. It was about where it was. May 16th, the very next day, suddenly McDonald's busts out and they have a $5 value meal that's coming back. And then Wendy's and then Burger King are following suit. I just bring this up to say it's interesting to see how things in the market just change all of a sudden. Because just 6 months ago, Wendy's was looking at, quote, surge pricing, which was they were going to charge more for the same food at certain times of day, kind of like DoorDash does. Now, all of a sudden, based on the CPI of April 2024, we're all doing a value meal. The prices are it's the same food.
Yeah.
It's but the numbers are just all over the place. And when you're a parent, you trying to take the kids somewhere quick or whatever, again, it ends up hitting your checking account.
Like, hey, kids, it's 3:00. We're going to McDonald's.
It's cheaper now.
Yeah.
All right, one more. Did you see that the New York Stock Exchange is polling relevant parties, whoever that is, for an interest level in 24/7, 365 stock trading? Have you heard about that?
Do you know what my feeling was when I heard about that? My eyes hit the back of my head because one of the blessings of the way we do the stock market is Friday at 1 on the West Coast, we're done. Like, we don't have to watch the market constantly or pay attention to what's going on constantly. We get the weekend. Bitcoin, crypto, that whole world has opened up this idea of 24/7 trading. All these trading companies are realizing we're making gobs of money with everyone connected to their Robinhood account, clicking on their phone and trading because they can charge on all those trades, whether it's the actual cost of the trade or what most people don't know about. There's actually a spread there sometimes that they're making money on the trade. And
What?
That's another episode. We'll talk about spreads.
Right.
And
15 other episode ideas.
So,
guys, can we review that? Thanks.
So 24/7 would mean that people are trading around the clock. People in my profession who spend a lot of time watching the markets, I would have to create some boundaries.
How does it work? I mean, that changes everything.
It does. It changes dynamics of the market. Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the market is dynamic, right? And like literally right now, if you're a trader, we know that when the market opens at 6:30 on the West Coast to about 9 o'clock is active. What happens at 9 in New York? It's lunchtime. Everyone's going to McDonald's. So trading slows way down, right? And then it starts to kick back up about 1:30 East Coast, which for us is going to be around 10:30. Market starts kicking back up. So what the actual investments do between 9 and 10:30 in the morning West Coast, we call it false signals, right? Like you can't really pay attention to what the market's doing because there's not enough players in the market. Then all of a sudden they come back from lunch and like, let's go. So from that 10:30 point on, it starts heating up right into that last hour from 12 to 1 West Coast time. Market really happens. So you can't really read the signals of the day during that lunch hour, which is amazing to me and just tells you it's a human system. It's a psychological system, right? That the market actually has a tempo to it. You make it 24/7. Like, are we taking a break from 9 to 10 West Coast, and then we'll do another 12 to 1 West Coast, and then maybe a lunch break dinner? Yeah. Like, how does that all work out? It throws a wrench in everything. I think the exchanges would love to make more money on our trades. I think most of the professionals in the business don't want it because it doesn't give us a chance to check out and not be paying attention to the market constantly.
And there's such an analog there such a connection between that and what the NFL is doing with their players, which is that the NFL has moved from 16 games, and now they want 18 games. And the players are like, dude, and the playoffs, and preseason. At a certain point, like my body's going to give out, and the league's like more because every game that they can have on TV is more money that they can charge, right? It's a very, very similar situation. At a certain point, the body gives out.
Well, we're going to pretty soon have the NFL, but it's going to be like the MLB where it's like 180 games, something crazy like that.
24/7 football.
At some point, you're just like, geesh. I like boundaries on it. I hope they keep it. I hope they don't do 24/7. But hey, got to adapt. Things are changing.
Thanks for checking out It's All Money.
This content was produced by Fermata Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. DBA, Sonoma Wealth Advisors. The opinions expressed by Fermata Advisors LLC on this show are their own. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Viewers and listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.